Cynophobia is an extreme fear of dogs. It can be a very distressing and limiting phobia. It may lead to you avoiding parks, avoiding visiting friends or family who have dogs, and in extreme cases it may even lead to you rarely going out. But, like any phobia, it can be overcome, and the best evidence-based therapy for all phobias is Cognitive Behavioural Therapy, or CBT for short. In this short but comprehensive 2-video series, I'm going to show you how you can gradually reduce your fear of dogs using CBT tools and principles. But I'm also going to tell you why people develop cynophobia, talk about some of the challenges of this particular phobia, and give you some tips on how you can deal with them. So let's start with how you get a dog phobia in the first place. Often a bad experience with a dog as a child can trigger cynophobia. You may have been bitten by a dog or just been scared by a dog. Children are very small, and some dogs can be, well, very big. When this big hairy monster charges at you, it can be very intimidating for a child who probably doesn't understand that the dog just wants to play. Or you may have learned the fear from a parent who had at least some level of fear of dogs themselves. If you know what triggered your phobia, let me know in the comments below. For me, I was bitten by a dog as a child. It only left a small bruise, but I did develop a mild phobia, which carried through to adulthood. But most people who are scared of dogs in childhood grow out of it. In psychology, this is called fear extinction. Fear extinction is defined as a decline in conditioned fear response following non-reinforced exposure to a feared conditioned stimulus. Put simply, if through your childhood you continue to be exposed to dogs without anything reinforcing your fear, then the fear gradually disappears. But what would reinforce your fear? Well, obviously being bitten a second time would, but in most cases it is behaviours that reinforce the fear. A child who's had a bad experience with a dog may hide behind a parent when they see a dog. Parents play a big role in whether a phobia becomes extinct or becomes worse. If the parent encourages the child to hide behind them, the fear is reinforced. If the parent gently encourages the child not to hide or avoid dogs, the fear diminishes. As the child grows into adulthood with no parent to protect them, they develop their own behaviours to protect themselves from the perceived threat of dogs. In CBT, these are called safety behaviours. Common safety behaviours in cynophobia are avoiding places where there may be dogs, crossing the road when you see a dog, carrying something like a walking stick or a dog repellent spray to defend yourself from dog attacks, tensing up when you see a dog, or keeping your hands up for fear of being bitten. Let me know in the comments below what safety behaviours you use. The reason that safety behaviours are such a problem is that part of the brain called the hippocampus learns from your actions what is dangerous and what is not. Anything that you avoid or try to protect yourself from is hardwired into your hippocampus as a danger, and the more you perform safe behaviours, the more dangerous the hippocampus thinks dogs are. So when you see a dog, the hippocampus sends a message to a part of the brain called the amygdala to activate the fight or flight response. This results in a huge surge of adrenaline and cortisol, which speeds up your heart rate and your breathing, makes you shake and gives you a strong urge to flee. In CBT, this is explained by the anxiety cycle, which goes something like this. You leave the house and you see a neighbour is walking their dog. You get the thought that the dog could bite you. It makes you feel anxious. Your heart starts beating faster. So you cross the road. This behaviour reinforces the belief that your neighbour's dog is dangerous. So you get more thoughts like, what if I hadn't spotted the dog until it was too late to cross the road? This makes you more anxious. And now you start to feel your heart race every time you leave the house. So you employ another safety behaviour. Before you leave the house, you start checking out the window that your neighbour is not walking the dog. And so the anxiety cycle keeps going around and around, and each time it does, the belief that dogs are dangerous or dogs will bite you gets stronger and stronger. So how do you overcome this fear? CBT works on two parts of the brain. The cognitive part of CBT works on the logical part of the brain to help it overrule the hippocampus and the amygdala. The behavioural part of CBT retrains the hippocampus not to associate dogs with danger, so it doesn't trigger the amygdala into fight or flight mode. So let's look at one of these cognitive tools first. This is a thought record. You can download this form from the Get Self-Help website, who have kindly allowed me to use their forms. I've put a link in the description. When you've had a recent incident with a dog that triggered your phobia, fill in one of these forms. There are helpful questions at the bottom of each column. In this example, the situation was seeing your neighbour walking her dog. You felt fear that you rated at 90%. Your physical sensations were a racing heart and shaking. Typical thoughts and images are about the dog biting you. Maybe you envisaged the dog killing you because you saw a news story about a dog killing a child. Now in the next column, write the evidence that supports those thoughts being true. For example, dogs do sometimes bite people. You saw on the news that a pit bull killed a toddler. You may struggle with the evidence against column, so think of what someone who is not afraid of dogs would say. Has your neighbour's dog ever savaged someone? Could a dog that small really kill you? In the next column, try to come up with a balanced statement that covers both the evidence for and evidence against these thoughts. Starting with the words even though can help. For example, even though dogs do sometimes bite people, my neighbour's dog has never bit anyone. Even though a pit bull killed a toddler in the news, this little dog could not kill a full-grown adult like me. Watch out for generalization and catastrophization, which are common in phobias. If you use words like all and every, you are probably generalizing. For example, all dogs bite. Every dog is dangerous. Whereas the reality is some dogs bite and only a few dogs are dangerous. Catastrophization is when you take a small threat and blow it up into some kind of catastrophe like death or serious injury. Now look at this balanced statement and re-rate your fear in the final column. In the final column it says, what could you have done differently? Don't worry about that for now, because we will cover that next as we look at some behavioural tools which are very effective in reducing fear. Do this thought challenging exercise regularly and challenge all the thoughts that you have about dogs. Doing this exercise can strengthen the logical part of the brain so that it thinks differently about dogs. But you also have to work on the fear processing part of the brain, the hippocampus and the amygdala. CBT has some very powerful tools that work on these parts of the brain, and they can help eradicate the fear response completely. I'm going to show you how to use these tools in the next video, which when it's released will appear here. Click on subscribe and the notification bell to make sure you don't miss out.